When peaceful worlds cry for help, the crystal-clear waters of Aquatica Prime shimmered under the gentle light of its blue star. Beneath the endless oceans, the magnificent cities of the Zelani stretched across the seafloor like living coral reefs. Bioluminescent towers pulsed with soft rhythms, and schools of engineered fish carried messages between the floating gardens where the aquatic beings tended their kelp forests. Elder Marilyn glided through the central archives, her sleek form cutting gracefully through the warm currents. Her silver scales, marked with the wisdom patterns of her 8 centuries of life, caught the ambient light as she searched through the ancient data crystals. The Zelani had achieved perfect harmony 5,000 years ago, abandoning all weapons and military technology in favor of art, science, and peaceful exploration. Their cities were marvels of biotechnology, grown rather than built. Living buildings that filtered water, produced oxygen, and provided everything their inhabitants needed. The Zelani had created a paradise beneath the waves, a civilization that had solved hunger, disease, and conflict through cooperation and understanding. But paradise was about to be shattered. The first warning came from their orbital monitoring. Stations, massive ships, angular and dark, dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. The vessels moved with predatory purpose, their hull designs speaking of a species that valued intimidation over beauty. These were the ships of the Vorthan Empire, and they had come to claim another world. Council leader Titlesong received the initial reports in the Grand Assembly Chamber, a vast spherical room where representatives from across the planet gathered to discuss matters of importance. The chamber's bioluminescent walls pulsed with nervous energy as hundreds of Zelani floated in perfect formation, their concern visible in the rapid color changes rippling across their scales. Commander Reefwalker, head of their peaceful exploration fleet, delivered the grim news. The unknown vessels number over 300. Their energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. They've established blockade positions around our planet and begun scanning our population centers. The Zelani had encountered other species before, but always in peaceful circumstances. Their explorers traveled the galaxy seeking knowledge and friendship, not conquest. The concept of aggressive first contact was almost incomprehensible to their society. Titlesong's elegant form shifted through spectrum of worried blues and grays. Have they responded to our greeting transmissions? Only with a single message. Reefwalker replied, his own colors darkening with distress. They demand our immediate and unconditional surrender. They claim this system now belongs to something called the Vorthan Empire. Gasps echoed through the chamber as the assembled representatives struggled to understand. The Zelani language had words for disagreement and competition, but concepts like conquest and slavery were foreign to their experience. Elder Marilyn rose from her position among the advisors, her ancient voice carrying across the chamber. I have heard of these Vorthans in the deep archives. They are mentioned in the testimony of refugees from the Outer Rim, an insectoid species that believes in the philosophy of domination through strength. The archives contained records from countless peaceful species that the Zelani had encountered over the millennia. Most civilizations eventually evolved beyond warfare, but a few remained trapped in cycles of violence and expansion. The Vorthans were apparently one of the latter. Young, Counselor Current Rider swam forward, her colors flashing with the bright patterns of youthful determination. What do they want from us? We have nothing that could interest a military empire. Marilyn's ancient eyes reflected years of accumulated wisdom. They want us. The Vorthans specialize in enslaving aquatic species. Our biology makes us ideal. For underwater mining operations on worlds, they cannot exploit themselves. The horror of this revelation sent shock waves through the peaceful assembly. The Zelani had no frame of reference for slavery, having abolished even the concept of forced labor thousands of years before their current civilization began. title song called for emergency session protocols. We must contact the Galactic Cooperation Council immediately. Surely they will intervene to prevent this aggression. But the response from the Council was devastating. The interstellar organization, composed primarily of peaceful species, lacked any military capability. They expressed sympathy for the Zelani situation, but explained that they had no power to confront a major military empire like the Vorthans. Several council members even suggested immediate surrender to minimize casualties. For the first time in 5 millennia, the Zelani faced the reality that their philosophy of universal peace was not shared by all intelligent life. Some species had chosen the path of violence and exploitation, and peaceful words held no power against directed energy weapons. Current Rider refused to accept defeat. There must be someone who can help us. Some species with both the capability and the will to stand against these aggressors. Elder Marilyn retreated deeper into the archives, searching through the most ancient records collected by their explorers. Buried in testimonies from species that had survived encounters with aggressive empires, she found references to a civilization that defied the normal pattern of evolution toward peace. The Terrans, she announced to an emergency council session. There are stories about them in the deepest archives. They call them Deathworlders. The term had no direct translation in Zelani language. Their world was gentle and supportive of life, but apparently some species evolved on planets so hostile that survival required constant struggle. These Deathworlds supposedly produced beings of incredible resilience and fighting capability. According to these records, Marilyn continued, the Terrans, or humans as they call themselves, are unique among known species. They achieved advanced technology while retaining their warrior instincts. More importantly, they have something called moral codes that compel them to protect peaceful civilizations. The records spoke of humans intervening in conflicts across the galaxy, not for conquest or profit, but driven by concepts like justice and freedom. They were described as dangerous to fight, but trustworthy as allies, a combination that other species found both fascinating and terrifying. Reef Walker studied the archival data with growing excitement. These humans appear to operate from a region called the Terran Federation, approximately 40 light years from our position. But Elder, these records are over 2 centuries old. How do we know they still exist? We don't, Marilyn admitted. But what other choice do we have? The decision was unanimous. Facing certain slavery or destruction, the Zelani would send a desperate message into the void, hoping that somewhere among the stars, the legendary Deathworlders would hear their call and respond. Current Rider volunteered to compose the transmission. Working through the night cycle, she carefully crafted words that might reach across the vast cultural gap between species. How do you explain 5,000 years of peace to beings forged by conflict? How do you ask warriors for help when you have nothing to offer in return except gratitude? Her final message was simple and honest. To any human vessels receiving this transmission, we are the Zelani of Aquatica Prime. A species called the Vorthans is about to enslave our entire civilization. We have no weapons, no military, no way to resist. We know humans value freedom and justice. If you truly exist, if you care about innocent lives, please help us. We are running out of time. The transmission was broadcast at maximum power toward the human sector of space, carrying Current Rider's desperate words across the void. Most of the council expected silence in return. After all, why would advanced warriors risk their lives for an unknown species with nothing to offer in exchange? But 40 light years away, in the patrol sector near the Terran Federation border, Captain Sarah Mitchell stood on the bridge of the U-East Thunderstrike monitoring routine communication channels. The massive human dreadnought was returning from anti-piracy operations when her communications officer, Lieutenant Shun, called out with unusual urgency. Captain, "We're receiving a distress signal. It single quotes S.F different. You need to hear this." Mitchell moved to the communication station, her weathered face reflecting 25 years of Federation Navy service. She had fought pirates, raiders, and hostile aliens, but something about this signal felt important. As she listened to Current Rider's message, Mitchell's expression hardened with familiar anger. She had seen the results of slavery operations before. The Terran Federation had strict policies about such things, born from humanity's own dark history with oppression and genocide. "Origin point?" she asked tersely. "Aquatica system, approximately 40 light years from our current position," Sean replied. "The signal is being broadcast on multiple frequencies, maximum power output." Mitchell turned to her tactical officer. "What do we know about this Vorthan Empire?" Commander Torres pulled up the relevant intelligence files. "Aggressive expansionist power, Captain. They specialize in aquatic species enslavement and resource extraction. Intelligence estimates they've conquered at least 20 worlds in the past century." The captain's jaw tightened. This was exactly the kind of situation the Federation had been created to prevent. After humanity's own bloody journey from tribal warfare to stellar civilization, they had sworn to never again allow genocide, and then slavery to go unopposed when they had the power to intervene. "Signal Admiral Harrison immediately," Mitchell ordered. "Request immediate authorization for Operation Guardian Shield. Priority Alpha classification." Priority Alpha was reserved for active genocide situations. It gave field commanders broad authority to use whatever force necessary to protect innocent lives. No bureaucratic delays, no political considerations. When someone was being slaughtered, humans responded with everything they had. Within hours, the authorization came through. Admiral Harrison himself would lead a full task force to the Aquatica system. 24 capital ships, 40 destroyers, marine assault carriers, and support vessels. Enough firepower to challenge a major stellar empire in the depths of Aquatica. Prime's oceans, the Zelani waited anxiously for any response to their desperate signal. Most had given up hope when their communication arrays suddenly exploded with activity. The response was brief, but filled with a promise that sent ripples of hope through the peaceful species. "Zelani Council, this is Admiral Harrison of the Terran. Federation Navy. Message received and understood. Fleet is en route. Hold fast. Humanity is coming." For the first time since the crisis began, Elder Marilyn allowed herself to hope. Current Rider's colors shifted to patterns of cautious optimism as she shared the news with the population. The legendary Deathworlders had heard their call above their world. Vorthan assault ships began their descent toward the ocean surface. Warlord Zakth had grown impatient with the delay and ordered the immediate commencement of harvesting operations. The peaceful Zelani were about to learn what true terror looked like, but racing through hyperspace toward their world, traveling at speeds that pushed human engineering to its limits, came the storm that would change everything. The Terran Federation Navy was coming, and they were very, very angry. When Deathworlders answered the call, the Vorthan assault fleet descended toward Aquatica Prime like a swarm of metallic locusts blotting out the blue star's light. Warlord Zakth stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Flesh Render, his 4 arms clasped behind his chitinous back as he surveyed the ocean world below. The insectoid commander's multifaceted eyes gleamed with anticipation. At 12 feet tall, Zakth embodied everything the Vorthan Empire represented. His exoskeleton bore the scars of countless conquests, and his mandibles clicked with satisfaction as he studied the peaceful planet. Unlike species that had evolved beyond their predatory instincts, the Vorthans had embraced their nature as apex hunters, building an empire on the suffering of weaker beings. "Report status of the harvesting operation," Zakth H. commanded, his voice a series of harsh clicks and buzzes that the ship's translator converted into standard galactic language. Sub-Commander Krexith, a smaller but equally vicious member of the Vorthan military caste, approached with data tablets clutched in his secondary arms. Initial scans confirm the intelligence reports, Warlord. Population estimated at 8 billion aquatic beings scattered across 17 underwater cities. No military installations detected, no defensive platforms, no patrol fleets. The warlords. Mandibles spread in what passed for a smile among his species. The Vorthans had studied the Zelani extensively before launching their invasion. A peaceful species with advanced biotechnology, but absolutely no military capability. Perfect specimens for underwater industrial operations. Begin standard harvesting. Protocol, Zokt H ordered. Establish orbital blockade to prevent escape attempts. Deploy atmospheric processors to begin water quality modification for our industrial needs. I want the first 1,000,000 specimens loaded within 72 hours. The Vorthan fleet moved with practiced efficiency. They had perfected the art of rapid population acquisition over decades of expansion across the galaxy. Massive harvest ships took position over the major population centers, while smaller assault craft prepared to penetrate the ocean's surface, docked deep beneath the waves. Current riders swam frantically through the emergency command center that the Zelani had established. In their deepest city, the young counselor had been appointed to coordinate their planet's desperate defense, though they possessed nothing that could truly be called weapons. What is our status? She asked Commander Reef Walker, who was monitoring the primitive early. Warning systems left over from their pre-peaceful era. 300 Vorthan vessels have taken orbital positions, Reef Walker reported, his color shifting through patterns of controlled fear. Smaller craft are beginning atmospheric penetration. They appear to be targeting our major population centers. Elder Marilyn floated nearby, her ancient mind working through possibilities that peaceful beings should never have to consider. Have we received any further communication from the humans? Negative, Current Rider replied. But according to our calculations, even if they departed immediately upon receiving our message, they could not arrive for at least 18 hours. The reality was brutal. The Vorthans would complete their initial harvesting operation long before any potential rescue could arrive. But the Zelani had one advantage their attackers had not anticipated. 5,000 years of peace had not made them weak. It had made them incredibly good at cooperation and rapid problem-solving. Initiate. Emergency Evacuation Protocol 7, Current Rider commanded. All populations to move immediately to the deep ocean trenches. Activate every emergency shelter and prepare for extended hiding. The response was immediate and coordinated. Across Aquatica Prime, 8 billion Zelani began the largest migration in their planet's history. They abandoned their beautiful cities and retreated to the deepest parts of their ocean, where the crushing pressure and absolute darkness might provide some protection from their attackers. But the Vorthans had harvested aquatic species before. Zaith deployed specialized deep-sea assault craft designed to operate at any depth. His forces would drag the Zelani from their hiding places, whether they hid in shallow lagoons or abyssal trenches. The first assault craft broke the ocean's surface like spears thrown by an angry god. The Vorthan soldiers within were equipped with powered armor that allowed them to operate in any environment. They descended toward the abandoned Zelani cities, expecting to find cowering populations ready for easy capture. Instead, they found something that confused them. The cities were empty, but showed signs of incredibly rapid, organized evacuation. No panic, no chaos, no scattered groups of civilians hiding in obvious places. The entire population had simply vanished into the depths with a coordination that spoke of careful planning and iron discipline. Sub-Commander Zacht snarled as reports came in from multiple assault teams. Explain to me how 8 billion specimens simply disappeared. Krex studied the incoming data with growing frustration. They appear to have executed a planet-wide evacuation with near-perfect efficiency, Warlord. Our deep scan sensors are detecting massive population movements toward oceanic trenches, but the thermal layers are interfering with precise targeting. The Warlord's compound eyes glittered with anger. Peaceful species were supposed to be easy prey. They panicked, scattered, and made themselves vulnerable to systematic capture. The Zelani were demonstrating that 5 millennia of harmony had taught them something unexpected: how to work together under pressure with terrifying effectiveness. Deploy the deep hunters, Zacht H commanded. If they want to hide in the abyss, we will follow them down. But 40 light years away, something was approaching that would change the entire strategic situation. The Terran Federation fleet had been pushing their ships beyond safe operating parameters, racing toward Aquatica Prime with the desperate urgency that humans reserved for rescue operations. Admiral James Harrison stood on the bridge of the UFS Sovereign Thunder, the flagship of humanity's most advanced battle group. At 58 years old, Harrison had spent his entire adult life in service to the Federation Navy. He had fought in border wars, anti-piracy campaigns, and exploration, missions to the galaxy's most dangerous regions. But this mission felt different. The Admiral had read Current Rider's desperate message personally, and it had triggered something deep in the human psyche. The protective instinct that had evolved during humanity's long journey from tribal hunters to galactic civilization. An instinct that compelled them to shield the innocent from predators. Fleet status report, Harrison commanded, his voice carrying the authority of absolute command. All vessels maintaining maximum velocity, Admiral, replied Commander Jessica Park, his chief of staff. 24 capital ships, 40 destroyers, 6 marine assault carriers. Estimated arrival at Aquatica Prime in 14 hours. The human fleet represented the culmination of centuries of military evolution. Each ship was a masterpiece of engineering designed not just for combat, but for the projection of human values across the galaxy. They carried weapons that could shatter planets and shields that could withstand stellar bombardment. But more importantly, they carried the will to use that power in defense of freedom. Communications. Open a channel to all ship commanders, Harrison ordered. Operation Guardian Shield is now active. Rules of engagement are weapons-free on any hostile forces engaged in aggressive action against civilian populations. Our mission is simple: protect the innocent, eliminate the threat. As the human fleet raced toward its destination, the situation on Aquatica Prime was deteriorating rapidly. Vorthan deep-sea assault craft had begun locating Zelani hiding places, dragging screaming families from their emergency shelters. The harvest ships in orbit prepared their holding cells for the first wave of captives. Warlord Zakth watched the initial captures with satisfaction. The Zelani were proving more challenging than expected, but Vorthan technology and ruthlessness were overcoming their desperate resistance. Within hours, he would have enough specimens to justify the expedition's costs. But in the depths of space, sensors aboard the fastest human scouts detected the Vorthan fleet disposition. Captain Mitchell, whose ship had received the original distress signal, transmitted critical intelligence back to Admiral Harrison. Sir, we have confirmed enemy. Fleet composition. 300 vessels of various classifications orbiting the target world. They appear to be conducting large-scale population extraction operations. No defensive positions oriented toward interstellar approach vectors. Harrison smiled grimly. The Vorthans had positioned themselves perfectly for what humans called a classic hammer strike. Their ships were focused on the planet below, not watching for threats from deep space. Signal all vessels, the Admiral commanded. Prepare for immediate combat upon arrival. Target priority is any ship engaged in hostile action against civilian populations. Show them what happens when you threaten the defenseless. When the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Aquatica system, every sensor on every Vorthan ship immediately detected their arrival. The energy signatures were massive, far more powerful than anything in their databases. Zok studied the tactical display with growing unease. 52 vessels had just appeared, moving in perfect formation toward his position. Their energy output suggested technology generations ahead of standard galactic military equipment. Analysis of the approaching fleet, he demanded from his intelligence officer. Unknown configuration, Warlord. Energy signatures are off the scale. They appear to be transmitting identification as the Terran Federation Navy. The name meant nothing to most Vorthans, but Zok had access to intelligence reports from across the Empire. Humanity was mentioned in several files as a species to be avoided, not because they were particularly powerful individually, but because they had an unfortunate tendency to organize effective resistance against Imperial expansion. Signal the fleet, Zakth commanded. Maintain harvesting operations. Deploy screen elements to deal with this interference. But Admiral Harrison had no intention of allowing the slaughter to continue. As soon as his ships reached optimal firing range, he opened communication channels to both fleets. Vorthan forces. This is Admiral Harrison of the Terran Federation Navy. You are hereby ordered to cease all hostile actions immediately. Release any prisoners and withdraw from Zelani space within 1 hour. The response from Zakth was predictably defiant. The warlord had built his reputation on crushing opposition, and he saw no reason to fear a smaller fleet of unknown aliens. Human. Admiral, you are outnumbered 6 to 1. Withdraw now or share the fate of these aquatic weaklings. To demonstrate our resolve, we will execute captured specimens until you leave our operational area. Harrison closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the cold fury that always came when he encountered pure evil. When he opened them, his expression had hardened into something that would have terrified any human who saw it. All ships, weapons free, he commanded. Target any vessel engaged in hostile action against civilian populations. Operation Thunderstrike is authorized. The space around Aquatica Prime erupted in light as the human fleet opened fire with everything they had. 24 Capital. Ships discharged their main batteries simultaneously, sending relativistic projectiles screaming toward Vorthan positions. The aliens had never seen weapons that could deliver such devastating kinetic force across such vast distances. 12 Vorthan vessels simply ceased to exist, torn apart by human railguns that struck with the force of controlled asteroids. The remaining Vorthan ships scattered in confusion, abandoning their organized formation as they tried to comprehend what they were facing. Their plasma cannons and missile systems seemed primitive compared to human technology that had evolved through centuries of warfare against the most dangerous opponent in the galaxy, other humans. Captain Mitchell, aboard the UFS Thunderstrike, watched with professional satisfaction as her targeting systems locked onto another Vorthan vessel. Human military doctrine had been forged in conflicts against their own kind, the most adaptable, and creative warriors known to exist. Fighting aliens who relied on brute force was almost disappointingly easy. In the depths of Aquatica Prime's oceans, Current Rider watched the space battle through emergency sensors while coordinating the protection of her people. The ancient monitoring systems showed human ships moving through the Vorthan fleet like dancers, their point defense systems destroying incoming fire while their armor absorbed hits that would have shattered lesser vessels. How are they doing that? She asked in wonder, watching human destroyers exploit gaps in enemy formations with impossible precision. The answer came from her communications officer, who had been monitoring human fleet transmissions. Their coordination appears to be managed through quantum communication, networks that allow instantaneous tactical coordination across the entire battle group. What the Zelani were witnessing was the result of human military evolution. Centuries of fighting the most dangerous opponent in known space, other humans, had produced weapons and tactics designed to overcome opponents with similar technology and adaptability. Against the Vorthans, who relied on numerical superiority and intimidation, human forces were devastatingly effective. Warlord Zakth watched in growing horror as his fleet dissolved under human fire. Nearly half his ships had been destroyed or disabled in the first 20 minutes of combat. All vessels retreat to hyperspace, he commanded, abandoning any pretense of completing the harvesting operation. But Admiral Harrison was not finished. Pursuit squadrons, follow any vessel attempting to flee. Eliminate any ship carrying captives. The human Marines deployed via drop pods during the space battle, landing directly in areas where Vorthans were holding Zelani prisoners. Each Marine wore powered armor that turned them into individual weapons platforms capable of operating in any environment. Sergeant Maria Santos was first out of her pod, her armor sensors immediately identifying hostile contacts and friendly civilians. The sight of Vorthan soldiers forcing Zelani families into transport cages triggered the protective rage that burned at the core of human nature. Contact front, she announced over the tactical network. Multiple hostiles engaging civilian population. Weapons free. The Vorthan soldiers had never faced human infantry. Their own warriors were individually powerful, but relied on overwhelming their opponents through superior numbers and equipment. Human Marines had evolved to fight other humans, beings just as intelligent and well-equipped as themselves. The battle was brief and decisive. Within minutes, the surviving Vorthan ground forces were either dead or fleeing toward their remaining ships. The Zelani prisoners found themselves surrounded by armored figures who moved with lethal efficiency but spoke in gentle tones when addressing civilians. "You're safe now," Sergeant Santos told a group of frightened Zelani children, her armor's translator converting her words into their musical language. "We're here to help." Current Rider arrived at the rescue site within hours, swimming rapidly through the currents to witness the impossible. The legendary Deathworlders had not only responded to their desperate call, but had driven off an entire Imperial fleet. She approached the human Marines with a mixture of awe and gratitude. "You came," she said simply, her colors shifting through patterns of overwhelming relief. "You actually came." Admiral Harrison's response, transmitted from his flagship, carried the weight of human conviction. "Zelani Council, freedom is not negotiable. Slavery is not acceptable. The Terran Federation stands ready to defend any peaceful species against aggressive empires." In the aftermath of the battle, as Vorthan survivors limped away from Aquatica Prime, Current Rider asked the question that had puzzled her people since first learning of humanity. "Why did you risk your lives for strangers? What do you gain from protecting us?" Admiral Harrison's answer became legend among peaceful species throughout the galaxy. "Because someone has to. Because the strong have a responsibility to protect the weak. Because that's what makes us human." The rescue of Aquatica Prime marked the beginning of a new era. The Terran Federation formally established diplomatic relations with the Zelani, offering protection and friendship to a species that represented everything humanity aspired to become. And across the galaxy, other peaceful civilizations began to hope that perhaps they were not alone after all. The Deathworlders had answered the call, and the galaxy would never be the same. Asterisk,